Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best in preparedness information. You can find us online at thepreparednesspodcast.com. My name is Rob Hannes, and I'm the host for this show. You can reach me directly at rob@prepcast.info. This podcast, I think, is going to be a little bit shorter. This is coming out on the week of Thanksgiving. So I would like to thank everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. I don't know when you're going to be listening to this, but, my feelings and my thoughts are in the right place. This week, my plan is to put out several podcasts, and they're all about tools. Now, what I did is I got together with Greg. You may remember Greg from the old podcasts. And what I did was I brought him back on for kind of like an interview, but Greg works with tools all the time. And I don't mean just because he likes tools and has a big collection, but because he uses them on a regular basis. He's done a lot of work in a lot of different fields, including general handyman, where you're doing all sorts of things for home improvement and repairs and stuff like that. So he's constantly using tools. So since I am a computer guy and don't use, hardware and tools on a regular basis, I wanted to get with somebody who knew more. So I had Greg, we did a Skype thing and we talked about it. It ended up going like about 2 hours and stuff. So those will be a couple shows coming up. These should be the next two shows. So it's kind of like Tool Week here at the Preparedness Podcast. However, what I really wanted is I wanted him to go over a basic tool kit or a basic tool set. Now, we talked a lot about tools, and I learned a lot from him, and I think you're going to learn a lot too. However, the issue is that Greg has been working with tools for so long that, he doesn't really see it at a basic level anymore, much like because I'm doing preparedness for so long, I have a hard time remembering what it was like when I first started getting to preparedness because, you look at things different. I mean, I have some memory of that stuff, but you really don't look at it from that perspective anymore. So what I thought I'd do is I would put out this podcast, and in this podcast, it would be me going over a basic toolkit, because I think a basic toolkit is important, not only for everyday emergencies, repairs and stuff around the house, but also it's one of the things that you should grab if you're going to evacuate. You should grab your basic toolkit because we need tools for a lot of different things. Before we jump right into this, I want to just cover a couple things. You're going to have a lot of free time this week with the holiday. Hopefully, you've got the time off. You're going to be sitting around, you're going to be stuffed full of Thanksgiving dinner, and then you're going to have leftovers the next day. When you're sitting around and got nothing to do, head on over to the website and take a look, especially if you haven't had a chance to go there. There's a lot of good information there. All the podcasts are there. The show notes are there. You can take a listener survey. You can go ahead and, tweet and Facebook some of the articles we've got there. A ton of stuff is there. You can check out a little blurb on the new mini guide and stuff. So, when you got nothing to do, just head on over there, check out the advertisers, and this is a great time because you've got some time off from work to focus on your preparedness plan a little bit. I think you'll find a lot of good information on the website itself. I also want to go ahead and take care of the sponsor for this podcast, and I'm going to go ahead and let my friend Charlie McGrath go ahead and tell you about it.
Charlie McGrath of WideAwakeNews.com here with a message about Legacy Premium freeze-dried storable food, available at BuyEmergencyFoods.com. I recently returned from a trip to the manufacturing facility, and I'm here to tell you it was impressive. Over 50 employees working hard to produce the highest quality, best tasting, most healthy, certified GMO-free freeze-dried storable food on the market. And now that I've been to the manufacturing facility, I can tell you, from receiving to production to shipping, these guys have one thing in mind. That is quality, plain and simple. Please do yourself, do your loved ones a favor. Be prepared for an uncertain future with Legacy Premium freeze-dried storable foods available at BuyEmergencyFoods.com. You can call them at 888-543-7345. That number again, 888-543-7345, or better yet, visit them online at BuyEmergencyFoods.com.
And just to reiterate, buying food sooner than later is going to cost you less. And I know a lot of people are having hard time with the economy and making ends meet and be able to fit it into your budget. But whatever you can do, the better it's going to be, because as time goes on, as the economy starts to collapse more and more, we're going to see more and more inflation. We're already starting to see inflation. So buyemergencyfoods.com is a great way to go ahead and bulk up your preparedness plan for food. Okay, so the basic toolkit. Now, it's really difficult to actually define a basic toolkit at some point, because when you talk to different people and you look at different scenarios of, gee, what would I need for this or what would I need for that, your basic toolkit seems to always keep increasing. So what I did was I tried to break it out into a basic toolkit, and then I went just beyond the basics a little bit, and then I went even a little bit farther and included an electrical kit, because you never know when you're going to have to do some minor electrical work. Now, the first thing I want to cover in the basic toolkit is the kit, or where you keep this kit. Toolbox, it could be metal or plastic. A tool bag, a tool roll, or a bucket, I think, are probably the most common. I don't really like toolboxes anymore. I mean, they can be very convenient to be able to just open it up and, get a tool fairly quickly, but they're bulky and they're chunky and they're clunky and they're very hard to pack, in a bug out sort of scenario. I have taken a lot of my containers for all the things I would evacuate with. What I've done is I've taken them out of the hard shell containers, the tote bins, the boxes, the tool chests and stuff. I've taken out of these rigid containers because I found that there's a lot of wasted space when you try to pack this stuff into your vehicle, or like in my case, the back of my truck. So, for example, tote bins, they are slightly tapered from top to bottom so that you can stack them inside of each other, and this is so the places that sell them can be shipped to their store relatively easy. You don't want to take up this huge amount of space for these containers, so they nest inside each other, which is great for shipping and storage, but it really doesn't work so well for us, because if you were to stack, say for example, tote bins in a room, you're going to see all this dead space between the tote bins, and it's not a lot of space, so it's not like you can put a bunch of stuff there. I mean, I suppose if you had pipes or long poles, you could stick there, but I mean, how many of these do you have? So I don't like rigid containers anymore. I've tried to move to bags wherever possible. One exception to this might be ammo cans. The ammo cans are designed to stack very well together, very efficiently next to each other, so you can actually stack a lot of these with very little space, actually no wasted space. So I do keep things in ammo cans, but you can't keep everything in ammo cans. So what I've done, and eventually when we get to this Fast Packs podcast, we'll go into this more, but I pretty much rolled everything over to like bags. And so I've pretty much done the same thing with my tools wherever possible. Now, I do have a couple plastic toolboxes, and I got them because they were on sale at the hardware store, and it's hard to pass up a toolbox, something that you can put a lot of stuff in. It's a kit, and I'm really kit centric, so I love putting kits together, and I'm like, yeah, I could use this for this or that. And honestly, right now they're pretty much sitting empty. I've got one that's got some of my electrical stuff in it, but it's not really I want it to be. It's a waste of space, and I need to find a better solution for it, which will probably be another tool bag. That's what I use. I do also have a tool roll. It's an old military roll. It's canvas, heavy duty canvas. It rolls out. It's got these little pockets that you can slide the tools in, and a flap that rolls over, and then you roll it up and cinch it tight. And I like that because it's very compact. It doesn't contain everything. I've got a couple adjustable wrenches. I've got some pliers and some screwdrivers and stuff. And it's I like it because, again, it's compact, but it's a pain to constantly open up, unroll, take something out, and then put it back, roll it back up, and cinch it up. And then the other tools I have are basically in bags. And what I need to do is I need to consolidate my bags because some of them are kind of old. I've had them for probably 20 years, and some have got holes, and some are missing the zipper pull tabs. And, you make do with it because you have what you have. But I'm looking forward to going ahead and consolidating some of this into some newer bags. A very highly organized form of keeping tools is in a bucket. They got these little inserts that you can put in a 5-gallon bucket, and it's got little pockets on the inside and outside, and it makes it really convenient for like home use or driving to a job site or something like that. They're not so good for preparedness because think about it. You're evacuating and you're starting to throw stuff into the back of your vehicle or your truck, and I mean literally throw stuff in there because you're evacuating and you need to leave as quick as possible. So you're not going to be as gentle, as if you were going on a camping trip. You're going to throw stuff back there. Well, you throw this bucket full of tools back there, and it's just going to go everywhere, and it's going to be a mess. So I don't even have them because as convenient and as well organized as they can be, they don't meet my purpose because I need a lot of my stuff has to serve a dual purpose. It has to be something I use at home or like camping or something like that, but it has to have that dual purpose of my preparedness and survival kits and stuff like that. So my tools are something that's going to go with me, and I need them to be something that I can rely on keeping all the tools in one place. Now, I do have a tool case. I guess that's the best word for it. It's not really a box. Basically, it's a socket set that was given to me as a gift. It's great. I love this thing. I wish I could remember who made it, but basically it's like a briefcase, like a plastic briefcase that opens up, and it's got the drivers and the handles and the sockets for both metric and standard, and it's got some drivers to it like Allen and Torx and stuff like that. It's great. I love this thing, and I can make it smaller, but I don't because it's so well organized. I mean, every socket and piece of tool that's there snaps into place in this thing. And it's fairly small. I mean, it's small enough that it's not too clunky or chunky to keep around. It's like I said, it's about the size of a large briefcase, so it's not too bad. But the organization is just awesome for this. And it's easy to grab and carry and throw in the back of the truck, so I keep it that way. I'll try to look it up and see who makes it and put it in the show notes because I definitely like this tool set. And so if you have a set like that, of course, that would be good. But if you just got kind of loose tools, you need to have some way to keep them together so they don't get thrown around in the back of the truck or vehicle or something, and they can be kept organized, but yet they don't waste space. And to me, that's where a bag comes in, and a bucket and a toolbox really don't meet that for me. All right, now let's cover a basic selection of tools. Like I said, I wanted to cover a basic toolkit, and that's what this podcast will be. The next two podcasts are going to be me talking to Greg about tools, and he's going to cover more of an intermediate sort of coverage on tools. So that's why I've gone back and I've already done this with Greg. I'm actually doing this podcast after I've talked to Greg because I want to start with a basic tool set because the information that Greg gives is in many cases beyond just a simple basic tool set, but there's a lot of good information there. So again, tool week here on the Preparedness Podcast. First thing I've got here is screwdrivers. There are the slotted, which is your standard type, and then there's the Phillips, which kind of looks like a plus sign. I think the basic sizes of number 1, number 2, and number 3 will probably take care of most things, but I would also have a mini set for tiny screws. Everything from, say, opening up a laptop or fixing glasses. They usually come in a little vial that kind of looks like an elongated pill case, or like the one I have. It's a hollowed handle, and all the bits fit in there, and they're dual bits. It's for each size, there's a standard and a Phillips on either side, and you just pop them in. And I know that the removable tips aren't great as far as tool quality goes, but when you're talking about these small screws, you're not talking about anything that requires a whole lot of torque. So I haven't had any issue with this, and I think those are probably fine. The next is some Allen wrenches. You can get them in something that's like a split ring on like a keychain or a set of keys sort of, or you can get them that's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. And I have both. I prefer the Swiss Army knife because it seems to be more convenient, more compact. But the one I have, the spring broke, and so they flop around now, and it's not nearly as nice. The ones that are kind of on that keychain sort of thing, they're held in by springs. You can take them out of the spring so you can use both ends, and they actually are more convenient, I think. I just don't like them because they dangle and they kind of get caught in other tools. As we already talked about, a socket set is really convenient, especially for speed assembling certain types of furniture and other aspects like that. They're also good for working on cars and vehicles. I think you need to both have an SAE, which is your standard measurement in inches, as well as the metric. And I would also recommend having several sizes. You got your standard size and then your deep well sockets. I think those are very handy to have. And as I had mentioned, the socket set I have comes with a whole bunch of drivers. It has a driver handle, which is like a screwdriver where all these little bits fit in there. And it's got a bunch of different sizes for the hex or the Allen tips, as well as I think they're called Torx, and I think there's one other type that's in there that I don't know the name of it. Those have actually come in pretty handy, especially for when you're taking apart or trying to fix various sorts of things. I didn't know that you needed all this stuff, and luckily it was in the socket kit, and it's come in real handy. Another thing I like about this socket kit, it's got a bowl with a magnet in the bottom. So when you start to take out screws or bolts or whatever and you put it in the bowl, they're held there by this magnet. So when they get accidentally knocked or tipped over, they don't go shooting all over the place. I think that's a pretty handy thing to have as well. Now, I'm not covering these in any sort of order, so I don't put any priority or preference or weight or importance on one of these more than others simply because they're in this order. The next one would be a hammer. I think a claw type is the most useful, particularly the one that's got the straighter claw that you can use like a crowbar as opposed to the one that's really curved that would be better for pulling out nails. But the hammer could become a very general use tool because of that claw. It's kind of like a pry bar almost. You should have a good set of wrenches in both the adjustable, I think a small and a large will probably take care of most tasks, but you should realize that these adjustables aren't good for every situation because they're adjustable. A lot of times they can be not quite set right because you're trying to do it fast and you could strip off the corners on a bolt. So you should have a good set of combination wrenches. This is where they're closed on one end and an open box in the other. Again, both an SAE and metric so that you have inches and metric. A tape measure is always quite handy. Pliers, large and small for each of these, I think are good. You have your standard slip joint pliers. Those are your traditional pliers. I mean, if you go to type in pliers in Google, that's the image you would probably get. Then there's needle nose. These are quite handy for tight places. The tongue and groove, also known as channel locks. I have them. I don't use them that often, but when I do need them because it's a large nut or something large that I have to hold, they're very handy to have. And then the locking jaw or the vice grips, as a lot of people call them because that's the brand name of them. These are really handy, but I would not use these unless I had no other choice. You'll hear Greg and I talk about, kind of when to use these and stuff, and you can really ruin whatever it is that you're trying to fix or repair or take apart if you're using these. So they have a purpose, but they're typically not used. You shouldn't use them as a regular plier, is what I'm trying to say. Next on my list is wire cutters. You've got your typical traditional diagonal cutters, which is abbreviated as dikes a lot of times. There's Lyman pliers. There's all sorts of different types of wire cutters. However, unless you have a very specific purpose, I think you're standard diagonal cutters and a small and a large is probably going to take care of 90% plus of the wire cutting you're going to need. And according to Greg, these should even be able to cut like, your chain link fence and stuff like that. So apparently they're quite rugged. One of the things that I don't have in my tool roll, and my tool roll is my basically go-to tool set, is a utility knife, and I need to put one in there because you always got to cut something, and I have a pocket knife that I carry with me, but I don't want to use my pocket knife for hard junk use. If I'm cutting wire or stripping a wire or cutting carpet or whatever, I don't want to use my good knife, and not to say that I can't use it, but the point is that that stuff is really hard on blades. I don't want to have to keep constantly sharpening it and stuff. I'd rather have a utility knife, something that's designed to be junked up, and when it gets dull, you basically just replace the cheap blade in the handle and keep going. Now the ones I'm familiar with are they're kind of a gray dull metal, and they come apart. The handle comes apart, so you can replace the blade, and you slide this little knob to project the blade out. That's the one I'm used to. Greg was describing one that was kind of a folding sort of knife, where when it gets dull, you kind of flip it around, and it's got another blade that you can start using right away. Next thing we have is safety glasses or goggles. I think you're going to be pounding or cutting or anything that you're applying force to. You have the risk of things flying, and I think at the very least you need to protect your eyes. There is other safety equipment like gloves and hearing protection and chaps and stuff, but at the very, very basic, even if you're just pounding nails into the wall to hang a picture or something, you probably should have something on your eyes just in case whatever you're hammering or applying pressure to suddenly gives, and now you've got fragments flying. You definitely don't want them in your eye. That's just not worth it. So make sure you have a pair of safety glasses or goggles so you can keep your eyes safe. You should have, I think, a variety of hardware. Nails, screws, fasteners, stuff that you would not want to have to run out to the hardware store just because you want to hang a picture or something like that, or you want to repair something in your house, something very small, like, say, for example, the handrail of the stairs to your basement comes off. You want to get that fixed right away so people aren't falling down because there's no handrail anymore. There's some basic tape I think you should probably have. Obviously, the ubiquitous duct tape is always good. Electrical tape, I like having on hand. That's the black stuff that is non-conductive. Teflon, which is the plumber's tape, I actually find this really handy to have because when you do need to, say, even if you're replacing a shower head, you should wrap this Teflon tape around the pipe threads before you put the shower head on, and that will prevent leaks. And along with those, the last few things I have here on the basic kit are things like a carpenter's pencil, some glue, a wood glue, and an all-purpose glue I think is pretty handy. And then there's cable ties and baling wire. So yes, we have duct tape and baling wire on the basic kit list. But you know what? I remember taking a camping trip with my friend Greg. This is my other friend, Greg, and we went to southern Colorado and southern Utah during our college years one summer. And the muffler in my truck fell off, and we used baling wire to rehang it, and that's how we spent the rest of the trip, with my muffler, hanging up on baling wire. And I was concerned that it would fall off some point, but it didn't. It made it all the way back. So I definitely think baling wire has its uses. Now, those items would comprise what I consider a basic toolkit. However, it's definitely missing some things, and I put some of these items in what I call, going beyond just the basics. This would include like a square. Now, if you're going to be like cutting pieces of wood, or you want to make sure you're lining up the cut on the board to be, nice and perpendicular to the edge, a square is very handy. Also, it's got a small straight edge that you can use for measuring or drawing straight lines. One of those mini levels would fit into any toolkit. A longer level is, I think, more useful, especially if you're hanging pictures or stuff like that. but even the mini one can be quite useful. A mill file, if you come across a sharp corner or protrusion on a piece of metal, or if you need to sharpen like a machete or a lawnmower blade, this comes in very handy. A crowbar, just your standard typical crowbar. I think the flat ones are kind of neat, but according to Greg, the typical standard crowbar is going to be probably your best general purpose pry bar. Seemed to work pretty well in the Half-Life game, so I guess you can't go wrong with your standard crowbar. I think a saw would be a very good thing. The problem is that for me, I don't use a saw on a regular basis. In fact, the only saw I have right now is a jigsaw. Yeah, the jigsaw probably works, but I'd like to have some hand tools because, again, if the power goes out or something like that, I want to be able to continue to make repairs or whatever with basic hand tools. So looking around after talking to Greg and looking online and stuff, I think the 12-inch kind of like a hacksaw frame is probably pretty good. Greg recommends Stanley, which I will put in the show notes for his podcast that we went over. But basically, it's like a hacksaw, but the new modern hacksaw is a little bit easier to change blades and stuff. And you can get a variety of blades, which is why this becomes highly useful. You can get a wood blade, a plastic blade, a metal blade. I think you even get bone blades. And so it's a highly useful, highly flexible saw. Now, granted, you're not going to cut down a huge oak tree with it, but you're going to be able to do a lot with it. And it should fit in most tool bags. Last few items I have on the list here include a flashlight and probably a headlight. Now, you may have a flashlight in your other kits, but again, this is your tool kit, which you will be using mostly around the house. So, yeah, you might want to keep a flashlight. The only problem I have is that, with the batteries, if you don't keep checking on it, then the batteries can leak and stuff. So you need to keep an eye on that. One of those putty knife or scrapers can come in pretty handy for a wide variety of things. It's usually, you don't really kind of think that you would need one until you're like, hey, I could really use a wide, thin piece of metal to X, and that would be your putty knife. Chisels, when you need a chisel, you need a chisel. And just rounding up the last two items here is a staple gun, which, wide variety of uses, anywhere for anything from hanging up Christmas lights to hanging targets on cardboard boxes. The very last thing I have rounding up my just beyond basic list would be a cordless drill or one of those cordless or electric screwdrivers. I've had a few of these. The batteries don't seem to last all that long, and it might be because I keep it out in the hot garage. But I think a cordless drill makes a lot of sense. I've got some wire drills, and they're great because they're powered, and you can use them for all sorts of things, from drilling holes to screwing in screws and stuff. But they're corded, so they're kind of limited until how far the extension cord can go, and you constantly have to pull out the cord and plug it in and wrap it up and stuff. So a cordless drill makes a lot of sense. Moving on from here. Is going just a little bit farther. I put together an electrical kit. Now, as a ham radio operator, trying to make antennas and fixing connections and batteries and battery connections and stuff like that, it always seems that I need electrical stuff. So I think this is one of the things that you should add when you get around to it. And of course, you should also know what you're doing, but what I have in this list includes a butane soldering iron, and you can get a corded soldering iron, which works, but the butane doesn't require electricity, which is kind of nice. I would, include some solder, both thick and thin. Just make sure that your soldering iron has the wattage or the heat to be able to use the thick solder. A crimper for solderless wire connectors and terminals. I find this very handy for making quick splices, or when I want to, like, say, for example, crimp a terminal onto the end of a wire for a battery terminal. Want to screw it down to a battery terminal or some other post. Those are very handy. And then you'll probably need a collection of solderless wire connectors and terminals. I mean, they sell kits like that. You'll also need the little crimper that goes with that. Wire nuts, small, medium, large, you may not have a big use for them, but when you do want to put some wires together, they're highly handy. They're extremely cheap, so you might as well go ahead and throw some in your kit. Fuses and fuse holders. You've got the cylinder type, you've got the blade type, and if you added a few holders to your kit here, then you could add fuses as needed. And I think that's important anytime you're working with electricity, especially, or I should say, even if it's just small scale. For example, if you have a small solar panel and you're connecting up a charge controller and a small battery, even though it's all small scale, you still want to fuse where necessarily, so that if something goes wrong, that fuse pops and you're not burning out equipment or causing a fire or making that battery explode. You should have some wire on hand, some coils of wire of various gauges. Best way to know what kind of wire and what gauge you need to get is take a look at what you might be needing. Take a look at the solar panels and your solar batteries and your charge controllers. Take a look at the cigarette lighters, the cords that come out of there. That's the kind of the wire you're probably going to want to keep on hand. And of course, if you're going to do any sort of electrical work, you need to have a multimeter, something that can measure resistance, something that can tell you if there's a voltage, both AC and DC on a circuit, stuff like that. And, of course, learn how to use the multimeter as well. Along those lines, if you have not worked with electricity and electrical wiring and stuff, go ahead and throw a reference book on electronics or electricity in there, just so you have a reference, so you can always kind of like double check what you're going to do before you do it. And in fact, it really wouldn't hurt for you to kind of learn a little bit about that now before you need it, because if you do need to wire up a solar panel or a battery to an inverter because the power is out, it's good to know, and you should know it before you need it, just like everything else that we talk about in preparedness. And that is the basic toolkit. And I want to emphasize that it's basic. However, the basic toolkit that I've outlined here should allow you to take care of a lot of repairs in your house. You should be able to do a lot of repairs on the car. You're not going to do anything special, but you're going to cover, again, this covers the basics, the essentials, to be able to do a lot of things. And I think it's important. And even if you don't do this stuff yourself, you should have a basic toolkit, especially if you're a prepper. If you're going to be evacuating or bugging out, you need tools just in case. And that pretty much is going to wrap up this podcast. Now, again, the next two podcasts are going to be with Greg, and we're going to be talking more about tools. And it goes into a lot more depth about tools and what to look for when you buy tools, what are some quality tools, as well as a lot of tips on just general stuff that he kind of throws out there when we talk about this stuff. So until next time, folks, enjoy life, have a great holiday, and be safe.